Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Great to see you all. Welcome back to day 3 and the final day of our 3-day community meeting. It's good to see folks from the last 2 days. Just going through the chat list, seeing who's joining us. Excellent. Thanks for coming along. Today is pretty much the day you get a chance to have your say on our roadmap and the plan for this PI. And I'll pass it over to Kim shortly to give you some details and kick things off with the roadmap presentations. But I do want to highlight a couple of things. Today we have 2 breaks, but in only one break, the last one before the report outs, we will have our final trivia tournament. This is your absolute last chance to try and get up on the scoreboard and get some recognition for that. And then we will close out our community meeting with community awards, just to recognize some very important folks in our community for their contribution and their work. So you should definitely plan to hang around until the end of our day today so that we can, so that you don't miss that out. We will end 1 hour earlier today, so give you a little bit of time during your day. Why don't we kick things off? I'll pass it over to Kim.
Thank you, Simeon. Appreciate that. And good morning, good evening, and welcome everyone. Today's for our last day, and thanks for everybody for the great presentations throughout the week. We're going to hear from some of our roadmap owners and our work stream owners. They're going to give some brief presentations and recap the discussions we've already went through. And then after everybody does a recap of their different work stream session, what we're going to do is do some breakouts. And during these breakouts, we're going to help define the roadmap for what we call the next program increment. Program increment is what is the next kind of 8 weeks of work for us. And this is a great time to get involved if you haven't been involved, and also time for you guys to flex your coding muscle. So the first up, we're going to have Pedro basically come up and talk about the reference architecture, and then we'll have Paul Baker talk about business operations framework. We'll do Michael Richardson, and I'll share my screen to talk about ISO. Then Sam will come up and recap on the enablement. Then we'll have the scheme extensions, and then bulk payments and FX support. So that's the order, and I'll pass it off to Pedro.
Thank you, Kim. Good morning, everyone. So let me start by sharing my screen and showing the slides from the previous PI. Can you see my presentation?
We can.
All right. Okay, so last PI, we had 2 major goals, and we separated those goals into the reference architecture and the vNext build. The reference architecture was mostly about getting the finalizing the reference architecture documentation, because the discussions for the reference architecture had been done. We did have another discussion about the settlements, but essentially the big objective or the big goal for PI 16 regarding the reference architecture was to finalize the reference architecture documentation. We did that. We're now only missing 1 or 2 bits. Those things already have a PR, so it's already in review, and we have published the reference architecture documentation. So this is mostly done. There's one important aspect that Michael mentioned during the presentation Tuesday. This is not something that will be set in stone. So hopefully we will keep on updating these documents, and every time that we have some changes, we update the documents and make sure that the documents reflect the reality of the reference architecture. And hopefully we can continue having these discussions and having this virtuous cycle of every time that we have some change, something that influences the design, then we can update the documentation and make it official. So the update on this is we are pretty much done with this. This was almost concluded. The documentation is published. It's now in a update mode. So that's from the reference architecture documentation side of things. The other part that we split this work stream was the delivery of the alpha release of the vNext build. So that didn't start until halfway through last PI. So we didn't have enough time to deliver on the objectives. We have some work and significant work. We also didn't have the amount of dedicated developers that we wanted to get this done. So anyway, this was a risk that was identified. So what we've been doing is we've been doing as much as we can. We had 3 big objectives. The first one was to create the backlog. That was done, and the agreed scope that was done. So the second objective, and probably the most ambitious, because this is the majority of the work, was to actually deliver the initial versions of the bounded context. We haven't gotten to the business side of the bounded context. We're still on the foundational side of things, so cross-cutting concerns, logging, auditing, messaging, platform configuration. That's the stuff that we're working on. And hopefully we will get very soon to these other bounded contexts. The third objective was to build a demo. This was obviously very dependent on the availability of developers to have enough of the foundation so that we could build the demo and run the hackathon on top of the foundation. We don't have it, so that's pointless. Deliver the plan for the next release. This is today with the development efforts or the allocation, the developers that we have available for this. And the time when we started this development, our commitment is that we will have the alpha release ready by mid-May. Obviously, this does not adhere to the PI planning schedule. So this is when we expect to have it. Effectively, this means according to the schedule that we have, that by PI 18, we will have it, mid PI 18. So let's see how that goes. In terms of out of scope, risks and issues, out of scope is still exactly the same. Everything is the same. Risks and issues, I'd like to stress this because we did verify the risks and the issues that we predicted. So we don't have dedicated resources still. What we have is a lot of goodwill from 3 developers that are not full-time and still being pulled and stretched to do many other things at the same time. So vNext has not been the most, the biggest priority for all of the development team or for the 3 part-time developers that we have. Obviously, that risk manifested itself in us not delivering as quick as we wanted. So that's it from our update, from the reference architecture documentation and the delivery of the alpha vNext release.
Thank you, Pedro. So Paul, if you want to share next.
Yes, great. I will do that.
Thank you.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so this is the summary of last PI. Largely, we achieved most of our goals. Where we lacked on is community collaboration, and I think that is going to be the theme going forward. So, remind of what we did. We basically got the basic structure and framework in place, working, operational, and providing value. And that involved ISC, it involved including financial portal functionality, in supporting segregation of duties and make a checker where necessary, and then making sure that a compliance officer can in fact perform an audit on the results of this. So not only are we doing authorization and authentication, we can audit it to understand what happened. So what next? So what I see it is that we've got a really good foundation in place. We've got something that's working and is able to go live. It's in QA at the moment. It should be going live hopefully quite soon and being used. And and it's also been designed in a way that can be contributed to. So what next? I see improvement of what's there and extending the offering of what's there. You know, hub operators have real problems that they need to solve. They have operations that they need to make more efficient. They've got sort of integrity checks and processes that need to support their operations, and all of these need to be supported. So it starts off with documentation. You know, we've got a good set of documentations, but processes change. Those things need to be edited. We've got micro front ends, so the UIs themselves, they can be tweaked to improve them, make them better, extend the functionality in them. And then lastly, back-end APIs, you know, changing the way they work, and extending functionality. So that's the theme. Improve what's there, extend the offering of what's in place, and part of that is understanding the delivery of what's there, and then adopting it and extending it. The easiest ways to do this are adding new reports, enhancing the micro front ends and the backend APIs, and then adding in new micro front ends to support processes that are specific to your hub operations, or in areas that we haven't yet had a chance to tackle or provide support for. And that's my update. Thanks, Kim.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, Michael, I believe you're up.
I think I am too. Hold
Yeah.
on just a moment while I select a screen to share.
And you might as well do both of yours too.
Oh, no.
I know.
Okay.
Well, you can come back too, but whatever. It might confuse people though. So.
No. I just certainly wouldn't want to confuse people. Oh, no. Okay. So an ISO 20022 version of Moduloop. My slides, I'm afraid, are not nearly as professional as are Paul's, but anyway. So just a reminder of where we want to get to. We want to get to a position where there is a version of Moduloop which supports ISO 20022 agreed format messages. Now, originally, our plan was that meant adopting existing ISO 20022 messages for the purposes of the things that Moduloop wants to do. We decided over the course of the last PI that this was not the best way of solving the problem, and that the specific things that Moduloop, and indeed any level 1 compliance system, needed to do would not be ideally served by the existing ISO 20022 messages. In addition, we identified a number of areas where there were no ISO 20022 messages currently in existence, which supported things that we definitely needed to do. For instance, functionality to enable a link to be set up between a third-party payment initiating organization and a DFSP. So we decided to adopt a slightly different position, and that was to propose to the ISO 20022 standards organization that they should approve a different set of messages, which might include some repurposed existing messages, but would certainly include some new ones, and which were specifically designed to meet the requirements of a level 1 compliant interoperation system. We've made an initial submission which has been reviewed. We're currently working on revising that. And one of the things that I hope we'll be able to talk about as part of our discussions about what we're going to do in the next PI is to get as many opinions as we possibly can about what that should look like and what sorts of structures we should be adopting, what sorts of organizational structures and definitional structures we should be adopting in order to make sure that we get approval for the form of messages that will be most appropriate to what Moduloop wants to do. The second side of things that we will need to do is we'll need to make sure over the course of the next PI that whatever set of messages is approved by the ISO organization is, I should say, at least homologous with the existing internal Moduloop API definitions. I mean the FSP-IOP API in particular, obviously, but also the extensions, the third-party payment initiator API, the proposed foreign exchange API, those sorts of things. All of those, we need to make sure that for a scheme operator deciding how to implement Moduloop, it shouldn't make any functional difference whether they choose to do it using ISO 20022 messages or internal FSP-IOP messages. We need to make sure that those are the same as each other. And of course, going forward, we will need to make sure that that continues to be the case. So the other area that I'll be hoping to talk about today and that we'll be concentrating on in this coming PI is ensuring that, as I've said, the two messaging systems are homologous with each other and that we have a good mechanism in place for ensuring that they don't get out of step with each other. So those are the main things that I need to concentrate on. Well, I think we shall be concentrating on. I think that's a brief set of statements about what we'll be looking for. And I hope that anybody who has an interest in this area will be attending and helping us to refine our definitions and making sure that Moduloop gets the, how shall I put this, the messaging system it deserves. Okay, so that's the end of that one. And I will now, in the blink of an eye, switch across to talking about foreign exchange. Okay, so here we are on the foreign exchange front. You seeing that?
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. So again, the purpose here is to provide currency conversion, both wholesale and retail, as part of standard Moduloop transfer. We've talked about a number of different ways in which we could do this or should do this. So where we got to at the moment is a workable definition of the API, an initial analysis of the switch code requirements, that is to say, the things that would need to be changed in the switch to support the FX API as we have it defined here. A detailed proposal for how the switch might control currency conversion. And the reason I phrase things in this way is that the FX API is predicated around the idea that there will be a direct conversation between a participant and a foreign exchange currency conversion provider. And that will happen in a different way from simply as part of a currency conversion transfer. So the way in which the existing implementations have implemented this is to say, well, people will send a transfer and the switch will intervene to make sure that the currency conversion gets managed properly. We'd like to move away from that, but there is still a question that's been posed to us by existing implementers. So can this be made to work if the switch still continues to control how currency conversion is performed, and effectively the participants, the debtor party and the creditor party in the transfer, don't need to know what's going on. So we showed, or sorry, I showed when I talked about this on Tuesday, two ways in which we might do this. Those are not the only ways, obviously, and one of the things we'll be looking for in the discussion, which will be ably guided by Stefan Prinsloo from Cybrin, is to think about which of those we would like, and also possibly about whether there are other ways in which people might like to propose in which we might move forward. And we also had a little demonstrator for currency conversion and how it would work. So for PI 17, in any case, we need to have the foreign exchange currency conversion API agreed and published. It needs to be part of the things that the standard API definitions in Mojaloop. We have some alternative development possibilities, as I've already discussed. So the switch modifications to support the foreign exchange API as currently constituted, potentially some payment manager modifications to support foreign exchange without requiring DFSP changes. That will obviously need the first of those also to be in place. Third, code changes of the form I have described to allow the switch to manage and control currency conversion. We've also had some conversations in the chat around this about whether we should look at cryptocurrencies as a form of currency conversion. So that is to say something which is essentially analogous to using a cryptocurrency as a reference currency. But of course, we're always open to further possibilities on the basis that people who are attending this convening are almost bound to have better ideas than we are. So we're looking forward to that. This is a brief initial analysis of the work that needs to be done in the switch to manage the proposed API changes for foreign exchange. As you will see, as far as we can see at the moment, we don't think that they are very substantial, and we will therefore be hoping to have them done in this PI if we decide to go ahead with it, as long as we can get hold of some resources, of course. We've looked, I'll just click through this very quickly, we looked at the alternative, managing currency conversion with payment manager. So we have something in reasonable detail, well, in reasonable outline sequence diagram detail, I guess. So we can think about that. We've also looked at code changes, which would require considerable modification to the switch, would incur philosophical problems, as indeed raised by Miller with non-repudiation signatures. There's a detailed draft sequence diagram, and I've included the reference to that for those who are interested, which describes in detail how this process could work, which has been shared with interested parties, but any other comments from other people would be most welcome. Then there's the question of supporting crypto and digital currencies. Now, as I said, there's a perspective which says converting between fiat currencies using a crypto or digital currency is analogous to doing currency conversion via a reference currency. So we could use the FX API to support transfers of this kind. In principle, at least, that might not require settlement, at least not in the normal way. And it might also possibly support transfers between schemes. Obviously, this all needs definitional work, and one of the things that I'll be hoping is that the work that we do later on will support or give us a clearer idea of what might be involved in something like that. And I've left the board more or less completely blank for people to think about later. And that concludes my discussion about foreign exchange. Kim.
Thank you, Mike. Did you Okay, next up, we'll have Sam talk about 3PPI enablement.
Thank you, Kim. Hello, everyone. Let me share my screen. Can you see this, Kim?
Yes.
Thank you. Before discussing the roadmap, quickly reviewing the slide we presented in the session on the first day. This is where we are. As you can see, the last 2 points talk about what's in progress right now. And that helps lay the foundation for the work we are planning in PI 17 as well. So far, we have an official version of the third-party API published. We have the special interest group with Louis Daly as the convener. We have the implementation and end-to-end tests, which are now also included in the mainstream or main branches. The next step is to bring all these 3PPI services to production quality, and then develop the GSP, the Google Standard Payments Adapter, which can then enable third-party implementers deploy their apps and start using Mojo Loop 3PPI features. So in line with that, these are the 4 goals we have, which we can go into more detail during the breakout session. So first is productionizing, for lack of a better word, Mojo Loop 3PPI services. This will involve making sure that the API, the published version, is in sync with the implementation, that we have end-to-end tests and deployment validated and tested. And if there are any high priority critical bugs that are fixed, and any technical debt or features that are not implemented are implemented. And then, of course, the development of the adapter itself, which will enable 3PPI implementation. So initially, we want to use the testing toolkit to play the role of a PISP, because we saw that we can do that. And then it will be retrofitted. So Google is going to retrofit that initially into their PSP, but this adapter should be generic enough for any third-party implementer to start using if they use the GSP API. A couple of other key things here are the payment manager support for both the FSPs and the 3PPI side of things for third-party functionality. As payment manager is going through the review process during this phase at the DA and CCB, we are hoping to take the components available there once it goes through that phase, and then start building on that. Along with that, planning to have some comprehensive documentation as well, usage guides for hub operators, integration guides, templates for deployment and things like that. This is not finalized, but this is what we are thinking of right now. As you can see, we have the 5 items here. The first one is productionizing and profiling the existing components. Along with that, as part of this initial epic, we also want to have this included in the infrastructure as code so that it's easy to deploy and validate and repeatable. And then, as you can see, we have a DFSP integration guide. We want to write that, develop the integration guides. This is just one of the many documentation guides we want to develop, but we already have something that Louis and team developed. So similar to that, we want to have integration guides, and then development of the adapter itself. We have the payment manager support as item number 4, and as a bonus item, as we know that we have some implementations, RNDPS, if I'm using that acronym correctly, in Rwanda, looking at Mojo Loop. So we are hoping and looking forward to that they use the third-party implementation as soon as possible. So in that regard, we also have that as a bonus item, that it'll be using an ISO messaging. It'll support ISO messaging there as well. As I was saying, at this during this PI, Google does not want to do the changes yet. We're going to use the TTK there. But once we have the end-to-end flow working, these changes will be retrofitted into Google as the first, the third-party implementer that's going to take this. we're hoping that that will open up the way for other third-party implementers as well. There are some goals here, but I'm hoping that we can finalize that with the community support during the breakout session. That's all for me. Thank you, Kim.
Thank you, Sam. Appreciate that. Okay, last up would be Paul. Paul's going to talk us about bulk payment enhancements and FX support. I'm sorry, and merchant schema extensions and bulk payments. Good.
Definitely not going to do FX. I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, you can bring another topic.
I'll leave that to Michael. Okay, I'll share my screen.
Yes.
Just briefly go through the merchant scheme extensions first. Right, hoping you can now see that. So there isn't actually a workshop for merchants, so I'll quickly go through what we're doing. Anyway, I think we discussed it yesterday.
We're not seeing the presentation version, Paul.
Are we not? Well, it doesn't matter.
Okay, all right.
That's fine. Is that any better? I'm hoping. Is that better?
Infinitely. Infinitely.
Thank you, Mike. Right. So I'm going to briefly talk about what we've been doing. Lewis, Justice, and myself have been trying to drive this forward, and we have a plan. In fact, we're well into the process of executing that plan. Just to state that not a lot happened in PI 16, to be honest. In fact, it was actually the case that during PI 16, the three of us started working on it together, and pushed forward a little, but because we all actually have, full-time jobs as well, we didn't actually make as much progress as we hoped. But we think that's changing. So I'll just go through all of this. Okay, so this is what we've been doing at the moment. We've been developing a merchant backlog, looking at the stakeholders, in particular, our primary stakeholders, though there are other minor ones. The primary ones are obviously merchants, customers, DFSPs, and a payment scheme operator, a Visa, if you will. Then we went through use case identification, principally buying something, but that's not the only one. There's a whole lot of use cases around merchant registration, the creation and distribution of QR codes, and a whole bunch of other stuff. And there's again what Justice nicely referred to as enabler specification, which is all the infrastructure, all the stuff that you need to have in place to underpin this to make it all happen. So we've been from that, looking at the whole bunch of use cases. As you can see, these are the ones that we have defined for merchant payments. However, this is the full set. We're not planning to actually develop the whole lot of these right from the beginning. We think there's more value in taking the agile approach of building a proof of concept and expanding out from there. So the merchant backlog at the moment talks about the microservices that we need to support the API, an online portal for user interaction, in other words, creation of merchant registry entries, role-based access control around that, so that you can't just go and create your own merchant if you feel like it. We have multiple mechanisms for QR code delivery, but the primary one is static QR codes delivered by probably something as simple as email to begin with. Extensible data and an interface to it, the centralized merchant registration, and the creation and issuance of merchant IDs, and the assurance of uniqueness, and also securely signed QR codes, so that if you come across a QR code, you know it belongs to the scheme, and the scheme will only accept payments through a QR code which has been signed with the scheme's private key. And we are building more and more onto that as we go along. We're looking to develop a simple demo simple proof of concept, which is absolutely the most straightforward use case. So a customer takes their mobile phone, scans a QR code using the phone's camera, enters the price that they want to pay, accepts the terms of it and clicks go, enters some form of authentication, and then the merchant gets a notification that they received payment and releases the goods. We're going to use pre-generated static QR codes with a merchant ID encoded. There isn't going to be a merchant registry behind this. We're just going to reuse the existing Oracle. Keep it simple for a demo plan or proof of concept. It will look, in my personal view, it will look a lot more impressive than it actually is, because you really shouldn't look under the hood on these things for a demo. But it should get us rolling, and hopefully we can build out to actually build in the complexity you need for a viable merchant payment service underneath. And we're going to be using Coil's demo Mojo Wallet code base. So again, keep it simple. Use what the community has developed and build on that. We hope we will have a locally running wallet that can initiate a QR payment in the Mojo Loop sandbox. And we actually have one of Lewis's interns, a guy called Sam George, who has been lined up to do this for us. Thanks, Sam. And that's it. That's all I wanted to say about merchant payments. Since we have effectively a small group running this anyway, we haven't got a workshop because we've already pushed on beyond that point. So thank you. Leaving that and moving smoothly on to bulk. If I can find wherever that window has gone. There it is. There we go. So bulk payments, subject very close to my heart. I spent most of this morning working on bulk payments. Where are we now? Well, we're currently in the process of the early stages of development of a short-term solution, because for WinePay, we need bulk payments up and running like yesterday. So we're going to accept bulk payments from a DFSP and deal with them as though they're individual transactions, process them one by one, and assemble a single bulk transfer response. This is our representative flow that we're using so far. You will note here that there isn't a bulk get parties. We have a bulk quote request, bulk quote response, bulk transfer request, and bulk transfer response. That's because there isn't a bulk get parties in the current version of the API. However, in discussion, I'm told that it's going to be in the next version. So I'm going to modify this actually after this session today to add a bulk get parties endpoint, which we will implement in WinePay at the earliest stage, so that we can future-proof what we're trying to do here. But for this initial version, I was assuming that we'd have to do take a bulk quote request, break that, open that up, create a bulk quote response file, and do for each entry a get parties and a get quotes, and do a sensible result in the for each entry in the bulk quote response file, and return the aggregated bulk quote response. I will after this I'll break that up obviously to separate get parties and get quotes, and then the DFSP, if they choose to, can do a bulk transfer request, and we will again open up the bulk transfer request and do it as a series of post transfers for all of the entries in that list, and assemble a sensible aggregate response into the bulk transfer response file and return that to the DFSP. That's what we're going to do in phase one, but that's not good for the long term. As I said yesterday, we need scale. And so that's what I'm really going to be discussing in the workshop today. How do we go on beyond that initial approach to what we need in the longer term. So our initial idea, and we'll road test this today, is to use Payment Manager again, accept bulk payments from a DFSP and break them into individual bulk payments lists for each destination DFSP and submit each list to the hub in turn. The pros of this are it scales well. You can do big lists in the tens of thousands, probably in an individual list. Cons, it's obviously there's complexity there. And also it's not going to get us away from the issue of demultiplexing at the payee DFSP. I'm going to briefly step into a Miro board, if you'll bear with me. Sorry, I've got so many windows open. And down here, over here, we have the early version of what we're going to try and achieve in this. I will, however, have to extend this now to include the bulk get parties, but I'll do that after this call. So we have an outline of how we're going to do this. I know it's high level. We need to generate the stories from this, and we are going to separate it into back here. No, wrong one. There we are. We have 3 areas of focus. So the payment manager for the payer side, we have to develop support for bulk get parties, bulk quote request, bulk transfer request. We have to break down a bulk list into per DFSP lists and deal with it accordingly. We potentially have to do work at the payment manager at the payee side. If you get a bulk transfer request, then you have to break it into parts and do them one by one. And also we probably have to, which I haven't mentioned so far, we have to develop some support for the users of the service, be they a government, be they a large employer, be they an NGO. We have to develop endpoints on the Oracle for beneficiary registration, because otherwise there's going to be a lot of people on those bulk lists who it'll fail because they're simply not registered in an Oracle. And that's what I'd love to achieve in the next PI. Call me a dreamer. So thank you. And back to you, Kim, I think.
Yeah, thank you. That's great. Okay, so thank you to all the roadmap presentators. Let me share my screen. Okay. Now, one of the things I'll just want to step back for two minutes here. So for those of you that have been around for a while, we've been running this project using SAFe, Scaled Agile Framework. With the Scaled Agile Framework, what we've done is organize each of these sessions, these community events, around what we call PIs, programming increments. And really what this is time box for Agile. So as you can see right now, we're in PI 17. And once we're done, what we'll do is go into a week of planning. And really this process is to kick off that planning. And that's really like about what are we going to develop for the next 12 weeks, and then come back and show the group again. And you can see here on my slides that just kind of shows you all of our different program increments for the next year, so you can plan accordingly. With that, since we're going into what we call our breakout sessions after our break, one of the things we're going to do is after we get our breakouts done is we're going to do some report outs. And really the report outs are the work stream owners are going to come back and discuss what you guys discussed during your different sessions here. So at a point, we're going to use a board called Miro. And these Miro boards look something like this, and each of the work streams will have their own swim lane. And then this corresponds to the actual sprints within the PI. And folks will use sticky notes to actually figure out what type of features they want to develop. But most importantly, and sometimes the group might want to start with this, what are your objectives for the PI? What is at the end of these 12 weeks, what do you want to come back with to say that you've done? And objectives should be SMART, so they should be specific, measurable, and achievable. And we also want to make sure that if there's any concerns about the items on your objectives, we've noted any risks. So risk could be resourcing issues and things of that nature. And the other thing we do want to do is understand from the team how confident they are. So from a 1 to 5 scale, how confident are they achieving those objectives? The other thing you'll notice is that sometimes there's dependencies between some of these work streams. And with that, we have this little red string that we can attach to different feature dependencies as well. So again, we'll give you guys time in your breakout sessions. We'll have 6 different breakout sessions. 5 different breakout sessions, excuse me. And those breakout sessions are the reference architecture led by Pedro, business operations by Paul. We'll have pre-PPVI enablement, Sam. I'm sorry, there is one more. There's Michael, sorry, excuse me. The ISO one with Michael. And then we'll have Sam lead the 3PBI and Paul Macon doing extensions QR support. And then Paul Macon, as he said, he's just doing the one there. So again, you guys can join one of these breakout sessions, these 6 breakout sessions, and those will be done after the break. And then when you guys come back, the goal is for folks to actually make sure that they are able to discuss all these different things. And when you come back after the break, we'll make sure that you know which breakouts to join. You can certainly jump back and forth, but it makes sense because we only have a short time to probably take one and stick with it. And again, that doesn't mean you can't participate in the other breakouts or sessions during the PI. This is just the time for planning, and we're going to have multiple planning events next week. That's why we always allow 3 weeks during this time to make sure that we're prepared going in. So if there's not any other questions, I'll hand it back to Simeon, who can discuss the timing. Simeon, I guess we're going to have people go on break. Hello?
I'm here. So I think what we'll do instead, thanks, Kim. We have 12 minutes before our break. I will give you the full 12 minutes and we will return at 10 minutes past noon UTC time for the workstream breakouts. When you come in, you will see, I believe you'll see a slide with instructions on how to join the various breakouts. But if just to guide everybody, you should be able to see a button at the bottom of your screen written breakout rooms. When you get back, not now, and you should be able to select or join any breakout rooms. If you're still having trouble with that, there will be some staff hanging out on this main channel, and you can just let them know which breakout room you'd like to go to. And there we go. Thank you, Kim. You can just let us know which breakout rooms you'd like to go to, and we'll be happy to assign you to those to that room specifically. The breakout sessions are listed on your screen, and we have a full hour for the workstream breakouts. We will be sending out at least a 20-minute, 10-minute warning on each group before the workstream breakouts close. So please try and have all your conversations within the hour. And try and wrap up at least 10 minutes too. And immediately following the workstream breakouts, we will come back to this main call, and we will have our final trivia tournament session. After which we will quickly go, there'll be a short break, and then we'll come back with report outs and discussions. So do take this time. The next, I think that gives us 20 minutes up until 10 minutes past the hour, and then we'll come back and go straight into the workstream breakouts. Thanks, everyone.